For the most updated version of the Glyphs RPG blueprint, tokens, accessories and resources, please visit www.glyphsrpg.com. Also visit 2ddice.com for our internationally popular D20 RPG coins and our other masterful coin works.
Greetings, this is Charlie Smith, author of the Glyphs RPG Blueprint. So let's go ahead and dive into the blueprint itself with Chapter 1, which is an outline of the components that we use in the Glyphs RPG Blueprint. Before I go over the very specific items that we use in the game, which, like I said, deviates from dice and uses an array of components, I want to talk to you a little bit about the token system, which is essentially the core engine used throughout the game, done completely from scratch. So what exactly is the token system? Well, very simple. It's a tabletop role-playing engine that implements a specially crafted coin, like you see here, known simply as the token. And as you can see here, the token bears different symbols here. We're going to learn individually, which is where the game gets its name from. And as you can see here also, there's a whole board through the very center, and that we call the sights. And that helps players pinpoint the success or failure of certain actions. So the token system is very original, and to my knowledge is the only one of its kind. And the token that you see here is used to determine the outcome of random probabilities, variables, and targeted player actions. Now, grids of concentric shapes, they are employed in conjunction with many scenarios that the token is used in. So players spin, slide, flip, or toss the token relative to the context provided, which determines how the token is used for that specific instant. So what this does, this presents an entirely new dimension of immersion in the role-playing experience, in addition to the results of random probabilities like we're used to. So the player and the GM's own skill is actually used in the game to make it work. The first and arguably most pivotal component used in the Glyphs system is none other than the token itself. As you can see here, in its protective capsule, which comes included for free, because I want people to be able to carry the token so they can go game on the fly, and this helps it protect it from their from the contents in their pockets. And also, if you take off the capsule, you'll see that there's a QR code with a link to the Glyphs website that's got the blueprint itself, of course, and a lot of resources that players and architects, which are the GMs, can use. So, very nifty, convenient piece that we're going to break down in detail here shortly. The next thing I want to draw your attention to are the grids, which are used often, like I said. This here is a game board, which is an optional accessory that has both grids on them for your convenience. But, you know, if you're somebody who's a little bit on, are available for free to download and print at your leisure. So like I said, this is a board that's an optional accessory that I've included as a tutorial to help instill more of a board game type feel to the game, which I highly encourage. So real quick, it's divided into two sections. The first, on the left side, you'll see what's known as the Omni Grid. Now the Omni Grid is only used by the architect, and we'll get into that in detail. And a lot of the random gen piece is going to come Omni Grid, as we'll see in detail here. Is the Action Grid. Now, the Action Grid controls just about every player action there is, from focus attacks, from free-form attacks, powers, techniques, and skills. Everything happens from here. And yes, the architect has to use it too to be able to control their monsters. So, very nifty piece here, and it folds very neatly for you to carry around to your next adventure. And here are the two GM screens that are used to quickly reference a lot of the minutia involved in the blueprint at your fingertips. So this one here is the Architect's Trestle Board. So a lot of the basic GM related stuff is here. This is an optional accessory. And the other optional accessory is the quick gen screen. So a lot of character related content that your new players would use to create their character is right here at their fingertips. So archetype related stuff, different gambits, and a lot of details pertaining to weaponry and armor are right here. So this will save you time if that's the way you want to go. And finally, we get to the character sheets, which I call the character booklet, because in reality, in a universal system, there's so much data to track. It did turn out to be more like a booklet, as you'll see why. So this is an example, a human sheet from the booklet. So the first sheet is the bio module, as I call it. So anything biometric related to the character is here. So your archetype, which is like a class, your attributes, your modifiers, your character's personality, their polarity, or basically is what alignment is. So anything related to that is on the first page. Okay, the second page is your status module. So damage that's taken by your character is here, so you would mark that in real time, as we'll get into later. Armor details, ether points, which are essentially like magic points. The arsenal information here, which is different types of weapons that your character carries. Objects in their inventory. And over here, you'll see a lot of optional metrics that the GM can use, depending on how realistic they want their game to be. So that's tracked there. The third page is the abilities module, which you list your techniques, your powers, and your skills. And all those details go here. So you'll see a section here that's got a little part for custom skills. This system is meant for you to create your own content. So if you think of a skill that's not in your character's archetype, and you think you might be able to use, or it's not in the defaults, then feel free to use it here. Now, each bubble here represents a level of skill. So there's 1 through 5, and you'll see what that means as we get into the skills and the leveling process. But so all that's related here. Powers are listed here. Powers, magic spells, or whatever. The ether they consume, the level, and here you'll notice there's specific targets on the action grid that it needs to hit in order to work. We'll go over that later. And techniques are listed here. A lot of this game in combat is technique driven. A technique is a special maneuver or a skill set booster that gives you an advantage over the opponent. So those are listed here. And finally, page 4. Now, when you're creating a new character, this is not important because page 4 is meant for a more developed character. This helps chronicle their journey, the treasure they've accumulated, any vehicles they may have, any assets or property that they own, any allies or contractors that they're with, any affiliations, any major accomplishments. But the most important piece that I want you to see here on page 4 is the relics piece. So any magical item of importance, any alien artifact, anything unusually special would go here. Now, so that's what this page is for. It shows you where on your body or inventory it's located and all the details of the item. So, like I said, for character creation, not so important. But as your character develops, you definitely want to have this on hand. Okay. So now let's get into the token details itself. Now let's talk about the token in detail here. First, let me get your attention to the token itself here, the actual piece that's being used. Really, what the token is a glorified, gorgeous challenge coin, brushed silver finished. It's got a very special epoxy coating on it. It helps protect it from use. This is meant to be used and abused quite a bit, so it also helps with the sliding, which was meticulously calculated grids in order to get a reasonable amount of success and failures in there. So overall, it's a very sturdy piece, and the whole, like I said, in the middle helps pinpoint certain actions when you use it on the action grid and the omni grid, as we'll see in the tutorial. So that's the token itself. Now I'm going to divert your attention here to the an exploded view of the token. Now it is double-sided. This is just one side. Now let me kind of go over the first are the digits. Now, most of you using dice are familiar with the digits in different sequences: a D10, a D20, a D12, 6, 8, etc. In Glyphs, I only use digits 0 through 9, which are the most fundamental numbers in any calculation. So those are right here. See, as you can see, and in one hand it could function like a D10, but in actuality, the numbers here are used for a whole set of different calculations as we get in through the book. Okay. The next thing I want to show you are the path glyphs, which are right here. So what the path glyphs do is, let's say you want a random road or a wall or a hallway or whatever, and you want to determine which way it goes or how it functions. That's what those do. Okay. The next are the polarity glyphs. Now those are right here. So you got X for neutrality, plus, triple plus, a single plus. And polarities are basically alignments, or they can be seen as intensities or degrees on a certain spectrum. Now, if you'll notice, like I mentioned, the token is double-sided, so this view only shows you one face, obviously. But on the other side, you'll see there are negative polarity symbols. So instead of a plus, you would have a minus and a triple minus and so forth, plus neutrality. So that functions like a yes or no, or when you're randomizing polarities and getting different data, that's how that works out. So you have a lot of options. Now, the next row of glyphs are your cardinal glyphs. So you've got northwest, northeast, east, southeast, south, southwest. So, and then west, of course. So if you want to know what direction your destination is, or where a certain noise came from, or where the enemy is approaching from, or anything of that nature, that's what these are invoked for. Okay, so the next item that we're going to talk about are the function glyphs, which are right here. You've got the clock-looking item, the skull, the social bubble, and the wrench-looking icon. So you've got your event glyph, your conflict glyph, your social glyph, and your skill set glyph. Now, the function glyphs do exactly what they say. They denote a very specific purpose of an object, or most importantly, you're going to see this throughout random encounters. So that's how you help determine the nature of the encounter. We'll get into that in the random encounters chapter. So that's what those are. Okay. Then in the middle here, you see these awkward looking symbols. These are the permutation glyphs, which are here, 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 and here. So those, you're not going to use those a whole lot. They basically help you further define a subject, mostly physically. So say, for example, you're randomly generating a circle, and you spin and it lands here. Well, this implies stretching, right? So a stretched circle might imply an oval, as an example, and that's mostly used more in the environments chapter and the anything physical related, but otherwise you're not going to use those too much. Now, here are the sites, the very center of the token. Now, when you use the token to in the OmniGrid to generate random content based on where it lands, you want to go whatever lands in the dead center of that. Now, it is a good practice to use a pencil or a dry erase marker, if you got special dry erase sheets, to mark where your token lands, so there's no debate whatsoever. Good practice to get into. So that's what that's for. Now, most of the time, besides the sites themselves, you're going to be using two sets of glyphs the most, from my experience, and others have told me as well, which are the element glyphs and the states glyphs. Now, the element glyphs are exactly what they are. And they denote elemental qualities. They're alchemical in nature. They're actually derived from the tarot cards. We use them in tarot and other oracles. So they're very timeless in nature. And they're going to help us define random qualities that are a little more subjective. So somebody's personality, what their intents are, how they think, those types or qualities are here. So carbon or earth, air, water, and fire. So you're going to be seeing those a lot throughout the book, and sometimes they're used in different combinations of each other, especially when we get into the damage system. So we'll get into that later, not to throw anybody off. Okay. Finally, you have the states glyphs, which are here, 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 and here. So you've got something that's square or linear in nature, something that's more structured in nature or more clustered. Then you've got something that's more dispersed in nature or circular in nature, depending on what your context is. And last, something that's triangular, pointed, sharp, or disruptive in nature. So the states glyphs are extremely handy in describing the nature of, it's usually something physical. So an object, the environment especially, the condition of a building, or even the formation of an incoming enemy. So the arrangement of people, the arrangement of buildings. So they deal with arrangement and structure. So you're going to use these quite a bit, especially the Game Master. Now, good news is, you're thinking, what in the hell did I get myself into with all these symbols? Now, number one, I will tell you right off the bat, the token, if I may say so myself, is vastly superior than dice. And by the way, I sell dice because I invented 2D dice, but with all due respect, this is a superior item here, because the token generates random numbers, as we're all used to, but it also gives you a wide range of tools of interpreting context. So that's what we're going to learn, a lot of it throughout the book. Don't let it intimidate you. Take it step by step, and let it grow with you. The token, I mean, yes, we are using this for gaming and for fun, but I mean, really, you should treat it sort of like an oracle in its own right. It's a very powerful item, one that deserves respect, and something that you grow with over time. So don't expect to master it in one session. Don't let it intimidate you. Take your time and get familiar with the blueprint and some of the general meanings, and just experiment. Glyphs is all about experimenting and developing new things, and that's where you come in. Okay, let's see, what else did I want to cover here? So that's pretty much it for the token. Now, afterwards, I want to go ahead and get into each of the grids and how the token ties into this. So we're going to go over that shortly. So now that we have a general understanding of what the token is, and the symbols and digits all over the token, you're probably wondering to yourself, how in the hell do I read this damn thing? How does it work? So forth. So, very simple. First, when you're going to read one of the glyphs or the digits on here, you have to randomize it. So you have a number of options. You can lightly spin, flip it, you can toss it, or spin it. Now, if you spin it, I recommend a very light spin. If you go too hard, it'll take too long, too much game time, and fall over the place. So a light spin is very simple, just enough to get a randomization effect. So experiment to your liking. So the way you read the results is very simple, sort of like a compass, as with the two-dimensional dice coins that are on 2ddice.com. Same principle. Basically, let's say that I'm spinning for the digits, right? And I want to know what number I'm going to read. So you spin it, it lands, and your result is a 9. Okay, you're the architect in this example, and it lands on the 9 because that's the most upright or centered number. So it is very much like a compass because it's a flat surface. There is no other way to read it. Let's say I'm rolling, or I'm spinning. I gotta stop saying rolling. That's a bad habit. We're all used to. We're spinning. In glyphs, we spin or slide or flip because it's a coin. So when I spin my token in this example, and let's say it lands, and I want to read the states glyphs. Well, these are my states glyph, like we mentioned, and voila, the result is here. The cluster glyph, or the polyhedron, depending on which way you want to interpret. So this is my result in this case. Makes pretty much sense to me by now, don't you think? So if it's a permutation glyph that you're trying to read, guess what? You spin it and it lands here. Upright and centered would be here. Okay? Now, let's say that you get two potential results that are completely level to each other. Let's say it lands a little awkward, or you're not quite sure which one to pick. Very simple. Most of us, especially in the gaming world, read left to right. So you always want to go with the result to the left because that's how most people read, at least those of us that are involved in gaming. So, as an example, let's say I'm reading my functions glyphs. Is it the event glyph or the conflict glyph? Well, like I just mentioned, you want to go left to right, so your result would be this, if they're level to each other like they are in this example. So that's essentially all there is to it. Now, let's say that we have a case that we're interpreting damage, and like I said, I will get into the damage system later throughout the book, but damage is one of those things that uses a combination of glyphs. Okay, so it'll use a combination of the element glyphs. So, same principle here. These two, in our example, they fell evenly, so you read left to right, or in this case, clockwise, if you're going to use two. So you start here, and you work your way here. So that's carbon, and that's air. So in this example, if you're reading damage, it would be tier 2 damage, which we'll talk about further. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. So, to summarize, treat the token not just like a pocket oracle or a good-looking. As far as reading it goes, you want to treat it like a compass. Just remember that, and it's really idiot-proof. I mean, you can't mess this up. So, very straightforward there. Like I said, already a little bit less intimidating than maybe when you first looked at it. So now we've got that covered. Let's put it into some action here and play with the grids, and we'll go break down the line for you. So let's talk about the action grid here for a minute. This is by far the most, I guess you could say, crucial or common grid that you will use in the Glyphs gaming experience, whether you're an architect or a player. This drives a lot of the actions that characters and monsters do, and like I mentioned previously, there is a dexterity mechanism involved, and that's when this grid comes into play. So I got my token in hand, and we're going to learn how to use this bad boy here the proper way. But real quick, let's just take a look at the grid itself. You'll notice that it's broken down into several different aspects, I guess you could say. The first aspects of the action grid are the most obvious, are the different concentric shapes you see here, which are the hexagon, the square, and the two sets of circles you see here. Now, those represent the different targets that players and GMs alike will have to hit in order for an action to succeed. So, focused attacks, powers, techniques, and skills, in order to successfully execute them, need to land within certain zones of the action grid. So those are described in specificity throughout the book. So that we'll get to that shortly. The next part you want to notice are your 2 points of origin. Okay, what I mean by that is point of origin has to do from where your token slide starts from. Okay, so you've got the molecule point, which is common for most focused attacks and common actions, and then you've got the G point here, which is only used during a power, a technique, skill activation, and if your character's at a disadvantage in combat, because as you can see, it's a little bit farther, thus a little bit harder to do, because certain actions have more consequence and can impact the game greater. So that's why this is calibrated this way. So let's take a look at the token for a minute, and let's learn the proper way to do a token slide. Okay, so we're going to start at our point of origin here, and let's say that I want to do a focus attack, and we will get into combat in the combat chapter, but let's say that I need, let's say I do a regular focus attack to the enemy's head, let's say. In order for that to land, I need to land in zone 1, or the very center circle here. Okay, the black circle, zone 1, bullseye. So, believe it or not, there is a proper way to slide a token, okay? Now, especially beginners, you may see some people just doing this, just flicking it, or they're flicking their wrist or their fingers, or they're tossing it in there, and they're pretty aimless, okay? I have found, and others have found, that there is a proper way to slide your tokens that will give you more success than other attempts. Okay, now experiment to your liking. Everybody's different. Everybody's hands are different, and coordination is different. So use what works best for you. Okay, but I'm gonna go ahead and show you the better way to do it as we have found. So use your middle finger, okay, and your nail portion. So the nail, you're going to put your arm as level as possible, and we're not going to use your wrist like this. We just want to easily slide it. See that? See how easy that slides in? So we're going to start here, and boom, very simple. So easy, see? You want to ease it in there like that. Let's say I'm starting from back here. Now, if I'm starting from the G point, and my target would be the circle, then go for the bigger circle, okay? That is done basically to increase your odds of success if you're starting from back here, okay? We don't want to have too many disappointed gamers who can't hit the tiny circle, so that's done to make things a little more feasible for you. So same thing here, token slide, okay, oops, I missed, so boom, I got in, see that? So boom, see that, barely got in, easy, see? Now, if sliding is not your thing, okay, for most people it should be, but if not, you can always toss it in. Some people are better at tossing. So if I'm starting from the molecule, I would just start here and boom, just easily drop it in there. If I'm back here, oops, see, I'm not that good at tossing. So from here, see, toss it in, okay? I recommend sliding. Some folks are better at tossing. Like I said, to each their own. Now, one thing I want to point to here, those are mainly for focused actions we just covered. Now, on the grid, you'll notice the concentric numbers here. Those are zones on an opponent's body, and we will go over that, like I said, more in the combat-related chapters and the damage system and whatnot. But basically, those are not used for focused actions. Those are used for randomization. So let's say you want to do a free-form attack and just hit something on the target's body. You don't care what it is. You would start here and just spin the token. Okay, in that case it's a miss. But let's say you want to lightly spin it or just drop it, and wherever it lands is your target. Okay, so that's an example of how you would use this piece here, but most of the action is going to be through sliding or tossing the token. Okay, now you may have somebody who's handicapped or very uncoordinated or for some reason just can't get it, okay? You might have somebody like that, so we have to accommodate those people. If you do, then chapter 26, the solo play, the traveling alone chapter, does have a set of rules that are percentile driven in order to hit targets. So if you're an architect and you see somebody really struggling, then by all means help. But most people should pick this up. In fact, myself and others have noticed that in a group of 4 or 5 people playing, you will have one absolute rock star who will get it in just about every single time, okay? Roughly 2 of your players, they will hit it, you know, most of the time, meaning 70 out of 30, I guess you could say. And you may have that one person who does struggle more than others. So for that person or somebody brand new, either use the handicap rules or give them a little bit of leeway, especially a brand new person. A brand new person takes a little time to develop their skill in sliding and using the system. So we want to be realistic to people. That's the only thing I can say about that. So that pretty much covers it for the action grid. Pretty awesome thing here. Now, one thing that I want to show you also, this is on the board, which is an optional accessory. By all means, I definitely recommend getting it for a better experience. But for the convenience of your players, that same action grid is printed on the character sheet. So same dimensions, everything's identical, and we want to make it easy as possible for people. So it's your choice how you implement this amongst your group. So have fun with it, experiment. For your tokens, like I said, practice your token slides, practice getting acquainted with it. That does not mean when you start a session you have to spend 5 minutes practicing. That does not what that means. You can, if you want, a minute or two. I recommend the architect already get a little more comfortable with it, but players who are in the middle of a campaign, in between their turns, they should be able to practice for a couple seconds or a minute or so, just getting the feel for things. Okay, so that's what this is about here, and in a very short amount of time, you will be highly proficient in this system and have a lot of fun with it. So that's all I got to say about that. Now, let's move on to the next grid. The last component I want to talk about here largely pertains to the architect, which is, as I mentioned, the game master. This is the OmniGrid. Now, what the OmniGrid does is give an extra layer, or an extra tool, I guess you could say, to the architect to help generate even further detail to some of the randomized content, whereas the token in and of itself stores a lot of information for most uses. Some information needs to be fleshed out a little bit more in real time as you're generating, a level or the environment or a character name or some quality about a character, or you can even do nouns and etc. Think of this, of the OmniGrid, as sort of a random thought generator, if you will. Now, I will note that this is largely intended for the architect to use. Players will probably never even touch this, so if you're worried about learning how to master this as a regular player, don't even sweat it. Unless, of course, you wanted to maybe experiment with some of the randomly generated aspects of your character, then be my guest if that's what you want to do. But this is intended for the architect. So this grid is approached a little bit differently than the action grid. The action grid is focused on success or failure and focused actions and whatnot. The OmniGrid strictly concerns itself with generating random clues to help jog the architect's mind and into generating content on the fly. So same principle as the token, only we're using a grid to flesh out some more details. So you'll notice it's divided into multiple concentric zones here. Very pretty geometric arrangement if you see that. The most of the thing I'm concerned about here are the color schemes here, which represent random colors. Now, obviously, that is not every single color on the spectrum. Those are the main colors that we use and, I guess, experience on a day-to-day basis. But if you're generating a random color, then feel free to interpret it literally or as a variation of the color. It doesn't really matter. Like I said, there is no right or wrong answer to this. Okay. The second thing you'll see, and probably the most important in my opinion, are the letter arrangements. Okay. Now, all letters are, if you think about it, they're symbols, because what we're trying to accomplish here is to jog our mind into creating random content for the game using their surface mind. So whatever topic is on the surface of their mind will be drawn out using the tokens, glyphs, or in this case the OmniGrid, using letters, which are basically glorified symbols using linguistics. Okay, so what the letters do in particular, I want to talk about a little bit in a moment. But first, let me just show you how to use the OmniGrid. Now, basically, all you want to do, you can do it a number of ways. We're not concerned with focused actions like we are in the action grid. We're concerned of randomizing. So, lightly spin the token from the center, and whatever result decides on, that's your letter or your color. Okay, so experiment with different intensities. Obviously, you'll see that has to do with what position the token lands in. So experiment to your liking. There is no right or wrong way. You can simply toss it in if you want. Like I said, no clear target. You can flip it in. It doesn't really matter, okay? As long as you're getting somewhat of a randomized effect here is all you're really looking for. So let's look at colors for a second, okay? On here, you'll notice that the names are printed of the colors. That was done because during some of my tours, I had a couple folks approach me who were colorblind and had asked me to do that for them because, I mean, I got to make sure I account for as many people as possible so they can play the game. So that's why the names are printed on there for your convenience if you're one of those individuals. But otherwise, the colors themselves, they mainly focus more on the environment or generating somebody's hair color or clothing color. It doesn't really matter. There's so many applications you can use color for. And we will get into some of those in the book, by the way. So all you do for color, I just toss my token in, randomly, and it landed on X. So the sand color. So that would be the color of the paint in the room, or maybe somebody's hair color in that case. Okay, so let's say I want to do letter clues. Now, letter clues, as an architect, you're going to use quite a bit, again, to generate a fragment of thought, whether it's a character's name, a monster's name, a random object, or a noun, or pretty much any kind of word you can do with this randomly. Now, there is no right or wrong way to interpret a letter clue. Okay, all those are to help jog your mind a little bit into creating something more tangible. Now, a letter clue can simply be something as easy as one letter. So let's toss it in there. Oh, M, Mike. So that can be a name, or something that requires a little bit more detail to flesh out. So if that's the case, I recommend, and this is in the book too, doing letter clues of 3 and sometimes even 5 letters if that's what it takes. So like I said, there's no right or wrong way. All you want to do is trigger the first thought in your mind into something more cohesive. So as an example, let me show you what I mean. So let's say I'm looking for a character's name. So 1, okay, barely made it in. Okay, I missed. That's a reroll. So, okay. W, okay. But let's say I want to go into more detail a little bit. So I'm just going to flip it. Okay, boom, right there, S. So that can be a name. It can be a first name. So the first thing that comes to mind for me, so we've got a WS. So maybe Wesley comes to mind. So, see that? So it could be Wesley, or maybe I can do 2 names. I could do Walter. Let's say Walter Smythe. So those are some of the things that come to mind immediately when I spin those if I'm using a character name. If I'm using this to create a random noun or an object, I guess you could do this. So same thing. Okay, so that landed right here. Let's say that's S. So what's a random thing that comes to mind? So S. Let's do another letter. Let's flesh that out a little bit. J. And let's see. U. And let's spin it this time. Let's just spin. Okay. J, U, and D. Let's do one more. And A. Okay. So again, purely random. Now, when you're focusing on the context of your environment or setting, your mind will tend to focus on a certain subject. So let's say, in this case, I'm generating something for the environment from completely scratch. So S, J doesn't do anything for me. U doesn't do anything for me. D, A. So to me, that tells me sand. Or another interpretation might be sunny day. So it all depends how you look at it. In the book, like I said, you will be using letter clues for something more specific, and the steps will be provided. That just gives you a general overview of the OmniGrid and how it functions. Okay, pretty straightforward. It looks like a lot to take in, but the trick, just like everything here, don't overthink it, don't over-intellectualize, and don't something it's not. It's just there to help provide clues for the architect in your scene. So that's all there is to it. Let's move on to chapter 2, shall we?